If you lived through the handheld era, you know that the Game Boy Advance was a true technological miracle. We used to say it was a pocket Super Nintendo, but the truth is that in the hands of the right developers, it went much further than that. Today, we're going to list 10 impossible GBA games that push the hardware to its absolute limit, proving that when it comes to talent, there are no bit limits. Bro, what Camelot achieved with Golden Sun: The Lost Age was a complete flex on the competition. Released in 2003, this game grabbed the GBA by the collar and said, "You're gonna run this, and I don't want to hear any complaints." While most RPGs of the era limited themselves to static sprites and simple backgrounds, Golden Sun delivered a vibrant world filled with transparency effects, water reflections, and a pseudo-depth that perfectly tricked the eye. The real magic trick that pushed the hardware to its breaking point was the summons. When you unleashed Judgment or Iris, the game shifted from traditional 2D combat into a massive spectacle of scale, utilizing sprite rotation and particle effects that were incredibly taxing for a 32-bit processor. On top of that, the synergy system allowed for environmental interaction we usually only saw on home consoles, moving objects, freezing puddles, and revealing hidden secrets. All of this ran smoothly, backed by one of the richest soundtracks on the handheld, utilizing every available audio channel to deliver an orchestral vibe. In 2026, The Lost Age is revered as one of the pillars of the GBA. If you're looking to grab an original cartridge to play on your classic hardware, be prepared for a hunt. Collectors don't let go of this one easily. What makes this game impossible starts the very second you turn on the handheld. Man, the thing has an FMV opening, with Simple and Clean playing at an audio quality the GBA simply shouldn't be able to handle. Seeing Sora, Donald, and Goofy running in CG on that tiny screen was surreal in 2004, and it's still mind-blowing today. Square used video and audio compression techniques that pushed the cartridge to its absolute breaking point. But it doesn't stop there. Instead of hand-drawn 2D sprites, they used pre-rendered sprites based on the PS2's 3D models. This gave the characters a depth and fluidity of movement that made the game feel like a Pocket Kingdom Hearts 1.5. The card-based combat system in open arenas, with magic effects and summons happening simultaneously, was a constant stress test for the processor. The result was a cinematic experience that proved the GBA could, indeed, deliver Disney magic without breaking a sweat. In 2026, even with the Chain of Memories remake available on every modern platform, the original GBA version is still highly sought after for its unique art style and the technical challenge it represented. Since you've made it this far, I'm guessing you're enjoying the video. On behalf of all the RPGs in this list, I'm asking you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This helps YouTube keep delivering my deep dives straight to your feed. Released by Konami in 2003, the Boktai cartridge was transparent and featured a distinct bump on the back. That was a photometric solar sensor. The core mechanic was simple, yet genius. You control Django, a vampire hunter armed with a weapon called the Gun del Sol. To recharge your ammo, you actually had to step outside and expose the cartridge to real sunlight. The sensor read the intensity of UV rays and translated that directly into the game. If it was cloudy or nighttime, your character was at a massive disadvantage. But breaking the hardware here goes far beyond the gimmick. The game processed real-time lighting changes, dynamic shadows, and even boss purification mechanics that depended on the amount of stored sunlight. Trying to fight a vampire in the dark was a death sentence. Kojima created an experience that turned the GBA into a tool for interacting with the real world. something the console was never designed to do. The technical creativity required to integrate an external analog sensor with the 32-bit internal logic is something we've rarely seen again in handheld history. By 2026, playing Boktai the original way has become a challenge of both patience and wallet. Since the sensor is a physical component that can degrade or break over time, finding a fully functional cartridge is like finding a needle in a haystack. The impossible factor here isn't about polygons, but rather the sheer quantity and fluidity of the animations. The GBA had serious video memory limitations, yet the developers managed to pack in hundreds of animation frames for the Mario Brothers. Every move, every startled reaction, and even that famous Italian gibberish, ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba, came through with startling clarity. Seeing Mario and Luigi interacting simultaneously, jumping on one another or inflating like balloons, was a visual treat that lacked even a hint of ghosting or slowdown. Another bizarre technical achievement was the audio. The GBA is notorious for having a metallic or heavily compressed sound, but in Superstar Saga, the soundtrack by the legendary Yoko Shimomura and the voice clips from Charles Martinet sounded incredibly clean. The game utilized every processor cycle to ensure that attack timing, the very soul of the combat, was perfect and lag-free, even with particle effects and vibrant colors bursting on screen. It set the gold standard for what an action RPG should be on Nintendo's handheld. In 2026, it remains one of the most fun and accessible games in the library, though the price for original cartridges has seen that classic retro item surge. What makes Yggdra Union a technical impossible is its visual presentation. On the GBA, most games cut corners on sprite details to maintain performance, but Sting went the opposite direction. The game is packed with high-definition art, for the time, featuring massive character portraits during battles and a UI so complex and stylized it feels like it belongs on a much more powerful console, like the PSP. The real magic here is the Union system. During combat, the game processes multiple units attacking simultaneously in a frantic choreography of strikes, magic, and light effects that squeeze every last drop of processing power from the handheld. On top of that, the game features an absurd amount of high-fidelity voice clips and sound effects, something incredibly rare for the GBA. Seeing that amount of information, HP bars, skill cards, buffs, and unit animations, all running without a single dropped frame, is enough to blow any programmer's mind even today. It's a heavy, punishingly difficult game that oozes perfectionism. If you thought the GBA was just for chiptunes, Riviera the Promised Land is here to prove you wrong. It is likely the game with the largest amount of voice acting and audio clips on the system. While most games made us happy with a single voice line, Riviera delivered full-blown dubbed phrases during combat and special moves. Sting used audio compression techniques so effective they managed to fit hours of dialogue and high-fidelity sound effects into a single cartridge without losing that crisp quality. But it wasn't just the sound breaking the hardware. Visually, the game ditched traditional exploration for a static screen system. This was a genius move. By not rendering a scrolling map, they freed up the processor to display massive sprites and background art with an incredible color count. The characters featured detailed expressions, dynamic lighting effects, and full-screen illustrations, CGs, with a sharpness usually reserved for the PlayStation 1. It pushed the GBA so close to its limit that in some heavy scenes, you could almost feel the hardware giving its all just to keep up. It's proof that by changing how a player interacts with the world, you can unlock processing power for things no one thought possible. What makes Final Fantasy Tactics Advance break the hardware isn't just its visual beauty, but its sheer density of information. Imagine managing an entire clan with hundreds of items, dozens of character classes, jobs, and a law system, the famous judge system, that changes the rules of every battle in real time. The GBA had to process the artificial intelligence of multiple units on an isometric map filled with height layers, magic effects, and unique ability animations, all without the game stuttering once. Another point of pure technical wizardry is the soundtrack by master Hitoshi Sakimoto. He managed to extract a rich, full sound from the GBA's notoriously tinny chip, creating a score that felt like a small orchestra playing inside your pocket. The use of transparency effects and spells, and the intricate level of detail in city environments like Ivalice, showed that Square Enix knew every single loophole of the 32-bit processor. It's a game that oozes polish, featuring a clean and functional UI that keeps the player grounded even with so much happening at once. In 2026, FFTA remains a staple for strategy fans. Since it was a massive hit, it's easier to find than some of the more cult titles on this list, but that doesn't mean the price for a clean copy isn't climbing. What makes Sword of Mana break the hardware is its sheer aesthetic density. Unlike many GBA games that use generic or repetitive backgrounds to save memory, every screen here is like a painting. The level of detail in the sprites, from the swaying leaves on trees to the sunlight reflecting off the water, is something few 2D games of that era managed to replicate. On top of that, the GBA had to process a super fluid real-time combat system where you swap weapons instantly, each with its own physics and animations, all while handling elemental magic that fills the screen with effects. But the real technical complexity here is the day and night system, along with the days of the week. The game runs an internal clock that shifts the world's lighting, alters enemy behavior, and even opens or closes paths depending on the time. Handling this constant background processing, combined with one of the most complex partner AIs on the handheld, even if your ally is a bit stubborn sometimes, was a true stress test for the 32-bit processor. It's a dense game, featuring a deep weapon and armor crafting system, and a soundtrack that utilizes every millimeter of the console's audio chip. In 2026, with the collection of mana available on modern platforms, many forget this original GBA version. But for the hardcore collector, nothing beats seeing this pixel art shine on original hardware. What makes Tales of Phantasia truly impossible on the GBA boils down to two things: voices and audio. When the original game launched on the SNES, it shocked the world by featuring a fully sung opening theme. On the GBA, Namco didn't just keep that opening song, Yume wa Owaranai, they packed the entire game with voice clips during battles. Hearing characters shout attack names like Demon Fang or Tiger Blade with acceptable clarity on a handheld that barely had a dedicated sound chip felt like pure sorcery at the time. But the technical marvel doesn't stop with the audio. The Linear Motion Battle System, LMBS, shifts the gameplay into a real-time 2D fighting game perspective. Processing the AI of your allies, the massive monster sprites, and all the simultaneous magic effects, all while running a 40-hour story on a single cartridge, pushed the GBA to its absolute limit. Even with occasional slowdowns when the screen got too crowded, seeing this level of presentation quality on a handheld was jaw-dropping. In 2026, the GBA version is still a hot topic of debate among fans. While technically superior versions exist, like the PSP remake, the GBA port was the only official way many Western fans could play the game for a long time. The compression effort required to make everything fit onto that tiny cartridge is nothing short of legendary.
Conquering.
If the SNES had already pushed the envelope with the story of Terra, Celeste, and the iconic villain Kefka, the GBA had to make a Herculean effort to run this version. Final Fantasy VI Advance is no mere port. It is the definitive version in terms of content. The developers managed to cram in brand new dungeons like the Dragon's Den and the Soul Shrine, new espers, and a completely revised translation. The technical mambo here was the graphical adaptation. Since the GBA didn't have the same resolution as the SNES, the team had to readjust every environment and sprite so nothing looked cropped or awkward on the smaller screen. While the GBA's sound chip struggled a bit to replicate Nobuo Uematsu's masterful score, resulting in a slightly tinier sound than the original, the fluidity of combat and the lack of loading times made it a magical experience. Seeing the opera scene or the apocalyptic finale running smoothly, with transparency effects and Mode 7 rotation pushed to the limit, is worth a standing ovation. In 2026, even with the Pixel remaster dominating modern platforms, the GBA version holds its value because of the exclusive content not found in any other release. If you want an original cartridge to call this gem your own, get your credit card ready, because the prices are through the roof. I'm so glad you made it to the end. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, you're going to love my previous video. 12 turn-based RPGs you need to play in 2026. In it, I highlight modern titles that will keep you glued to your screen all weekend long. Don't forget to comment below on which of these impossible GBA games was your favorite.